Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Politics Hub. We're here in the constituency of Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes for a Target Towns special, and we're here to talk about trust. We've got exclusive YouGov polling for Sky News that shows that across the country, faith in politicians and how connected we feel to the people we elect to serve us in Westminster is plummeting. And what's startling is the speed of this collapse. It's happened since the 2019 general election, when voters in places like Grimsby, solidly Labour for decades, switched to the Conservatives.
I say thank you for the trust you have placed in us and in me, and we will work round the clock to repay your trust.
At the next general election, Labour wants this seat back, and Keir Starmer hasn't been shy about it.
In Grimsby a few months ago, I was really struck by a woman I met. She said something which was really simple. I don't just want to survive, I want to live.
At some point this year, when Rishi Sunak is expected to call an election, people here will be asked to go out and cast their vote at polling stations like this one at Grimsby Central Hall. So tonight we've brought together people who've told us they're fed up with politicians, people who say they may not even bother to vote. And we're also joined by the current Conservative MP and the former Labour MP who wants the seat back. What will change their minds and yours? It's Thursday, live from Grimsby, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening and welcome to this Politics Hub Target Town special live from Grimsby Central Hall. So tonight, we're revealing how trust in politicians across the country has been evaporating, and we're here to talk about why. Just to give you a sense of the place, in 2016 in the EU referendum, nearly 70% of people here voted to leave, one of the highest shares in the country. And in 2019, the Conservatives took this area from Labour for the first time since World War II. Right, let's meet our candidates for tonight then, who are going to be standing in the Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes seat. So we have Leah Nietzsche, who is the current Conservative MP for this area. She won the seat of Great Grimsby in 2019 with nearly 55% of the vote, turning it blue for the first time since 1945. She is 54 years old. She was born in Grimsby. Before becoming an MP, she worked in television on the programme Biker Grove, I remember that one, and for more than 20 years taught television production at Grimsby College. As an MP, she was a big backer of Boris Johnson. Last year, she said he'd done more for Grimsby than any other politician in generations, if ever. Melanie Onn was elected the Labour MP for Great Grimsby in 2015, becoming the first woman MP for the area with just under 44% of the vote. She was then re-elected in 2017 with a share of just under 50%. She's 44 years old and also born in Grimsby. Before becoming an MP, she worked at Labour Party's head office, and she was also a regional organiser for the Unison Union. As an MP, she quit the shadow cabinet, shadow front bench, twice. First in opposition to Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, and then to vote against a second Brexit referendum. In 2019, Mel Onn lost her seat to one Leah Nietzsche, admitting on the night that she was disappointed, but it had been the greatest privilege of her life to be the first woman MP for her hometown. Thank you for joining us tonight. I should add as well, the SDP have also announced a candidate for this seat. And at the last election, the Lib Dems and the Green Party also fielded candidates. Reform have signalled that they will too. So let's have a look now, shall we, at the reason that we're here. Our exclusive new polling carried out for Sky News by YouGov, because what we found is that there's been a pretty stunning collapse in trust since the 2019 general election in particular. We asked people how much they trust British governments to place the needs of the nation above the interests of their political party. Now, the percentage of people who answered almost never has nearly doubled. It's now 49%. And it's people who voted for Brexit, like many people here in Grimsby, who've lost the most trust in British politics since 2019. So the percentage of leavers saying they almost never trust the government has shot up by 33 points, from 23% to 56% since the last election. Now, that increase is twice the number for people who voted for Remain. Right, so that's the backdrop, that's the setting we're in. Let's hear now from our assembled panel tonight, people who feel that maybe they've lost trust in politics, many of whom say they might not even bother voting in the next general election. So, you're the guys that we really want to hear from. I think the person I want to hear from first is Shannon. So, Shannon, thanks so much for coming tonight. You're a small business owner. Yep. You're the owner of a safety keychain company, Get Personal. Yep. So you're engaged, you're switched on, but you're saying you might not vote. Why not?
Because I just can't trust anything anybody says. And I felt like that since Brexit, when we were promised X, Y and Z, and it hasn't happened. So I'm just totally disengaged from it.
So did you vote to leave? Is that?
I didn't vote at all. I felt like it was too much of a responsibility. I didn't vote at all.
And is there anything that the guys tonight could do to make you change your mind, do you think?
Possibly.
What were you, expecting for politicians to do? Do you think you've always had this kind of loss of faith, or has it got worse, do you think?
It's got worse, like I said, from Brexit, but obviously, I listen to family and friends, and what they say has an effect on me, and they've always been voted Labour, and yeah, it's just difficult.
And how about the area that we're in now,
Yep.
in Grimsby and Cleethorpes? What are the kind of issues that you think stand out?
We're promised a lot, but it's never delivered. Talks of things happening in Cleethorpes, and then it doesn't happen, and people are just fed up. They're sick of being told this is what we're going to get, but it doesn't actually happen, and that's why people have just lost faith.
I can see lots of nodding heads. I want to bring in Steve. And Stephen, you've always voted Conservative, I think, but now you're saying if there's an election tomorrow, you wouldn't vote.
I probably would force myself to vote, because I think you should. I don't feel that there is anybody to vote for at the moment. I find politics almost unbelievable. There's nothing to believe in. There's no one to believe in. I think there's a lack of leadership nationally, a lack of statesmanship. The politicians that we looked up to and respected as children and young people seem to have vanished. It seems to be petty, about scandal, backbiting. I think there are important issues that need to be addressed in this country. And I think, you turn on the television and watch debates, and that seems to be sorely lacking in politics at the moment.
So it's often, if you put on the TV, you see the House of Commons, it's kind of how MPs are behaving, you think, that's turned you off?
It's sort of schoolyard and worse, isn't it, I think.
Has your opinion of politicians got worse?
I think, just picking up on what somebody's already said, I didn't support Brexit. I think there were a lot of false promises there. I think we've suffered as a result of it. I just think the things that we feel are important don't seem to be discussed at Whitehall or in Westminster.
What do you think is important?
Housing, promises in Grimsby and Cleethorpes, lots of new money coming in, which is absolutely fantastic, but we've got, some of the worst housing stock in Western Europe. Household poverty has got worse. It's not being addressed. I don't think it's being addressed quickly enough. Taxation, give with one hand, take away with the other. So we don't actually ever feel like we're ever going to be better off. The environment's a massive issue. We've got the Rwanda policy, which, talking to people before this started, I don't think anybody could have made that up with a scrap of paper if they'd sat in a room for, and that's become the centre point of political discourse in the last few weeks. And those aren't the things that we care about.
I want to bring in you guys a little bit, because Leah, I was just interested there in what Stephen was saying about Rwanda. Couldn't have made it up with a scrap of paper. What would you say to that?
Well, I mean, it is something that is different and we've never seen before. But other countries across Europe, the Western world, are looking at exactly these kind of solutions. We know that Rwanda wants to have people for a new workforce, and people are seeking refuge in Rwanda. So it is something that is unique, and one of the biggest areas when I'm talking to constituencies, they're very concerned about illegal migration. And so we've got to do something, and we've got to make sure that we can secure the borders and make sure that people who are coming here illegally aren't just going to stay indefinitely, because they are causing issues in some cases, cultural issues. It's increasing some of our crime as well. 12% of foreign nationals are in British prisons, for instance. So when you've got 12% of your prison population that are actually foreign nationals that we can't send back anywhere, then, you know, we've got some real issues across the whole of the Western world to have discussions about this and see what we can do. But immigration is always something people, when I'm knocking on doors, are concerned about, and so the government has to do something about it.
I'm keen to talk more about immigration as the programme goes on. I know you want to come in, do you, Sean? Go on. What you want to say?
A couple of things I would correct you on. It's not unique. It was first proposed to the Labour Party about 12 years ago. They kicked it into touch. So it's not...
The Labour Party actually had a policy. Tony Blair had a policy. He was going to actually send illegal migrants to Scottish Islands instead, and that was kicked into touch as well.
Yes. Yeah, that was kicked into touch.
Yeah, these issues have always been looked at by governments, and people want the government to act on it, so we need to act on it.
And I also think there is an issue with explanation and the way it's being perceived. Because, first of all, there's a lot of people saying, well, why don't they claim asylum in the first country? That's what they're supposed to do. There's no requirement under United Nations legislation for them to do that. Nobody's explaining that to people. And that is causing friction. And particularly the other side of it, the people coming across the boats, if they claim asylum, they're asylum seekers. They're no longer illegal migrants. If you're an asylum seeker, you're an asylum seeker. You know, there's no such thing as an illegal asylum seeker, and nobody really is making that point clear.
No, but there is such a thing as an illegal migrant. When somebody turns up to the UK who doesn't have permission to be here and doesn't have identification, then they are an illegal migrant. Absolutely, they are, in law.
Let's bring in Mel. Sorry, 70. You were going to
75% of them who come off those boats and claim asylum, thus far, those that have been processed have been given asylum.
OK, we'll talk more about this on the show. We'll have lots more discussion. Mel, I just wanted to pick up with you on... We've heard a lot of the kind of disillusionment about people saying that, you know, they don't feel that they like what they see when they turn on the TV. They see a load of politicians arguing, been promised a whole bunch of stuff for Grimsby and Cleethorpes, and it hasn't happened. I mean, you're the MP here as well, so you should bear some responsibility too.
But the first thing I think to say is that I'm really sorry that people feel that way, because I do think I'm part of a system that bears responsibility for not communicating politics well, for not engaging with people, not making them feel that they are heard enough through the course of our debates. And I think that the British public at large probably deserve to hear people occasionally say we haven't always been as good as we could. And I think the issues, for me, seem to be that there are lots of really complex problems. Some of them have been touched on today. And the solutions that have been offered have been really simple solutions for those complex problems. And I don't think we're giving the British public enough credit, actually, for the intelligence to be able to understand the nuances that exist in some of these policy discussions. And so it dumbs it down. We promise them something, you know, a magical solution, the silver bullet to all of their concerns. And then, of course, it cannot be delivered, certainly not in the way that people have been told to expect it to happen. So I think a bit more honesty would go a long way.
Talking about not dumbing it down, treating people, you know, with like they are intelligent adults, they can make up their own mind. I just want to bring in Mike Burton, because we had quite an interesting chat before the show about your ideas about how, I guess, politics can be more accessible. Because you were saying, I guess, the same thing as Stephen, saying that, look, you know, you turn on the TV and it's just a whole load of people arguing.
Yeah, I think for me, with what I do, trying to spread positivity, and I think that well-being and mental health is affected no matter whether you're in politics, life, work, out of work, whatever it is. And I think that we live in an era where nothing's changed. You've got people at 20, you've got people, please and no discrimination here, you know, 30, 40, 50, who actually, they're in an era where people are in this room now thinking about not voting. And a lot of the time, we're just touching what Mel said there, is if you actually put the information in a format that people will digest, which is modern, which is social media, which is in reels, it's interactive, it shows you exactly what it is, that's your first carrot to get people engaged in politics. Then you can get to the next level where they'll want to know more. Then they will read, they will listen. But if you don't hook people into it, people will just let it pass them by. And I think that's the biggest thing in this election that people's going to happen. People won't vote because they're not engaged.
Are you going to vote? What do you think?
I'm hoping that by the end of tonight, someone's going to persuade me which way to go.
There you go. That's a challenge. That's a challenge to both of you. The other thing that I did want to pick up on was, look, trust in politicians has been bad for ages. Everyone in this room knows that. But what our polling did show was a collapse in trust since 2019, which was, of course, when Boris Johnson won the election. Many people here in Grimsby and Cleethorpes ended up lending the Conservatives their vote, as he put it himself. I mean, you back Boris Johnson. Do you think he's responsible for some of the breakdown in the trust that we've seen?
I think, sadly, what has happened with politics is that it has become clickbait. And actually...
The question is Boris Johnson, though. Do you think he bears some responsibility?
I think, absolutely. You know, any senior politician, any politician bears some responsibility towards that. But the reality is what goes on in Parliament, people switch on PMQs, and I have to say, I thought some of the nonsense that went on in PMQs yesterday, for instance, was shameful. And you know, I'm put off by that, and I'm doing the job. But that isn't what happens. PMQs is almost the pantomime of actually what goes on. And it's much more what we do. What we do is legislate, and we look into the minutiae, and we talk about the detail. And whenever I'm doing that, I'm thinking about what have my constituents said? What do they want me to represent? I go to ministers and say, you know, this piece of legislation isn't going to work for people in Grimsby. You need to listen to me. That's what people don't see.
Talking about Grimsby, you said Boris Johnson's done more for people in Grimsby than any politician of his generation. You think he has?
I think he has, because he's raised... You know, nobody in Westminster even knew where Grimsby was until Boris Johnson. You know, whether you like him or whether you loathe him, you know, he has put Grimsby on the political map.
And to be fair, a lot of people here voted for... is there anyone here who reckons they'd be more likely to vote Conservative with Boris Johnson as leader rather than Rishi Sunak? You think so, yeah? You'd prefer Boris Johnson over Rishi Sunak?
Well, what I would like to say is that at least we were given the option to vote for a party that was led by Boris Johnson. And I think, you know, talk about leadership, you know, like him or loathe him, that was somebody who, you know, his name was on the ballot paper. General elections are about party elections, and people chose to vote.
Do you think he's more charismatic than Rishi Sunak?
Well, you've skipped past Liv's Truss very conveniently.
I did, so, yeah, that's true.
You know, and you know, I think any sort of first-year A-level student studying economics could tell what was going to happen with the budget that she proposed. And we're talking about not giving the public, you know, credibility to understand how things work. You know, so and I do think he was more charismatic than both of them. I'm not saying that I would vote for him at the next election, because we've had that conversation, but I didn't vote for the two prime ministers we've had since, that is for sure.
I mean, it's interesting. Have been picking up, I have to say, a few rumblings in Westminster that, you know, if Rishi Sunak does do badly at, you know, the local elections and so on, that there could even be one last roll of the dice, another leadership challenge. I mean, would that be something that you'd be tempted by?
The thing is, people do want to have charismatic leaders, and the difficulty is that for many decades.
For many
decades, we haven't had somebody as charismatic as Boris. And as good a politician, as good a person as Rishi Sunak is, I don't believe he does have that charisma that comes across on TV. Is he a good man? Does he want to serve his country? Yes, he does. And I think we need to be settled. I don't think we need any more leadership elections now. We've got to get on with the job, because that people don't want us to be bickering about this. We actually need to get on with the job. All this circus is just nonsense. You know, Rishi Sunak is a good Conservative, a good man, and I think he should lead us into the next election.
The polling, look, we talk about polling and the lack of trust since 2019, but look, the polling isn't just lack of trust in the Conservatives, it's lack of trust in all politicians, right? So Labour, Conservatives, Keir Starmer, Rishi Sunak. So I think we can actually perhaps listen to a little bit of things that Keir Starmer has perhaps said about what he wants to do for the economy ceiling, in the past.
That's the prize. A nation, once again a community. A country where we share a stake in every child, not just our own. A Britain with its future back. United, moving forward, standing tall, that delivers security, backs aspiration, opportunity for all, and truly believes, that the future will be better for its children. The future will be better for its
So that's Keir Starmer there, setting out his 5 priorities. I'm interested, let's do something, shall we? Right, if I say the word Keir Starmer, what word pops into your head? What word pops into your head? If I say Keir Starmer, what word?
I think self-belief.
What do you reckon, Keir Starmer?
Uninteresting.
Uninteresting. Keir Starmer?
A human rights lawyer.
I'm unsure.
Unsure, interesting. How about Keir Starmer? Any other thoughts, Keir Starmer?
Automaton.
There you go. Keir Starmer?
I don't know what to say.
I mean, it's not glowing, is it? I'll be honest.
No, it's not. And I think it's difficult, you know, if you're coming off the back of a big personality, and I think Boris Johnson undoubtedly was a big personality, you know, you're probably not going to get to that. What you do have alongside that big personality, of course, is something that has caused a huge amount of rumpus in the Conservative Party and left them in a state of chaos. So you have to ask yourself, I think, as an individual, you know, do you think that having that kind of leadership, which actually is incredibly divisive for a party, it was the Conservatives, of course, that got rid of Boris Johnson. If you have that kind of leadership based on charisma, then you risk really upsetting within the local party.
When we talk about chaos, there is no chaos going on in the Conservative Party. If we want to talk about chaos, let's look at what the Speaker did when actually you were going to have a huge rebellion in Labour. 100 of the Labour MPs were going to rebel over the Gaza vote, and the rules were changed to cover that up. So when we're talking about chaos, actually we're running the country, and yes, I'm a backbencher. My job is to say to senior politicians, ministers, I'm not happy with that because I want something different for Grimsby, and I'm going to put in an amendment. That's not chaos.
Should we, you know, defining Keir Starmer saying, oh, he's not Boris Johnson, I mean, surely you can do better than that. People in the room deserve better than that.
Yeah, and I was going to come on to it, sorry, but I was interrupted, which I think is another thing that people don't really like about politics, that you can't have the time or the space to say what it is that you're trying to say. And when I appreciate that there are challenges with modern leadership. And I think, you know, you can have that bombastic style of leadership or you can have managerial style of leadership. And I think we have changed massively as a party. And if you're looking at what leadership can do, the Labour Party of 2019 is no more. We have come a huge... taken a huge stride.
Jeremy Corbyn?
But it's him who has been able to do that. Well, you know, you've got different leaders at different times of political parties.
You didn't.
Well, I resigned. I did go back as a shadow housing minister when John Healey invited me to do that, because there is something bigger. You know, there is the party that you've still got to do a job of opposition or of government, regardless of who is there. But I think taking the Labour Party from a period of losing the most number of seats that it's ever lost and looking like it was going to be 2 terms before it even got its house in order, actually, Keir Starmer's leadership has taken it to being ahead in the polls and more trusted on every metric. And Keir Starmer trusted on every metric ahead of Rishi Sunak.
Well, let's talk about Rishi Sunak now, shall we? We talked a bit about Keir Starmer. I'm interested to do the same thing on Rishi Sunak, right? If I say Rishi Sunak... actually, forgive me, I should, in the interest of fairness, we should definitely, I think, listen to Rishi Sunak before we ask the questions to you. This is what Rishi Sunak said when he made 5 pledges in a speech at the start of last year on inflation, the economy, debt, NHS waiting times and stopping small boat crossings. Let's listen to him.
When I first spoke to you as Prime Minister, I stressed that trust was not given, but earned. I hope that in these first few weeks in the job, I have begun to earn your trust. And I've made 5 promises today to deliver peace of mind. We will halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting times, and stop the boats. But I know this is just the start of what we need to do to build a better Britain together.
Right, that was Rishi Sunak there. So Rishi Sunak, if I say Rishi Sunak, all right, you've got something to say about Rishi Sunak. What word comes into your head?
He's the first person that I've heard in a long, long time in politics that has come up with specific policies to be measured and for him to be trusted on his action. And there lies the problem in the British politics. There's not many people who'll do that. They'll all talk narrative, and that narrative is not measurable. You heard Keir Starmer. What one thing did he say he's going to do? What one thing did he say he was going to deliver that he could be measured on? Not one. At least Rishi gave you 5 things that he said he was going to do. Whether he's done them or not, another matter. But at least he said this is what he's going to do and measure him on.
Well, let's take you to that, Melanie, shall we? Because, you know, it's the fair point, isn't it? He's, you know, yes, we can criticise Rishi Sunak for not meeting those prior pledges, but at least he's given us something to measure him on.
Well, just today we've had a massive announcement on rail. So, you know, bring rail back into national ownership. You know, that will be a test of the first Parliament, making sure that, you know, connectivity...
That's what the Conservatives are already doing.
But you're doing it by default and not doing it on...
No, that's not priority for people.
The country.
I think in terms of connectivity, in terms of being able to devolve that to local people...
The man in the street, what's going to make his life better? The man and woman in the street. Nationalising Network Rail ain't going to change a jot. All right?
I'd say it's really
irrelevant
popular in the country.
to
It's
the
a really
voters
bold
of this
policy.
country.
Well, I don't think. Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that. I accept your point.
How is it going to change my life, nationalising Network Rail?
Well, I think that it means that the government can then pass that responsibilities and opportunities down to local devolved authorities. It means that there's much more passenger choice. It means that there's doing the routes that actually help local people get to work, get to school, travel, explore the country.
The Labour government can meddle, that's what it means, and it means that the rail unions who have been trying to cause problems with strikes for the last 2 years will have control of the country. I'm old enough to remember what that means. I remember British Rail in the 70s and early 80s, and it was not great. And that is not what we want to see again. You know, when I think about when I was at school and the trains that I used to go on that were government-run, they were dirty, they were slow, they were late, nobody was helpful. Now you can get on a modern train, get to Doncaster, get down to London. By December, we should have our direct rail back here to Cleethorpes. It's cleaner. You know, it's a totally different experience to what it was when we had a Labour government.
Let's get a bit of a sense, then. If you're in favour of rail nationalisation, put your hand up. If you're in favour of nationalising the rails. And if you're not in favour of it. I was pretty split, I'll be honest. Maybe slightly more people not in favour of it, but pretty...
I mean, some rail companies are very well run. Some have not been, and the government has taken control of it. It doesn't mean to say that you need to nationalise everything. What will happen is we will end up with the Labour government spending millions on marketing, millions on having new paint jobs on trains. I mean, it's going to be absolute nonsense. It will be a waste of money, and we will end up... We already have too much control of the unions in railways. It is back to Victorian times in the way that they work.
Melanie, what would you say to that?
I mean, it's very interesting that, you know, Leah takes a very 1980s perspective on everything. I don't think that is what is being suggested at all. We are already seeing trains not arriving on time, people being delayed. You know, Liz complaining about the trade unions, but there's a transport minister that is failing to converse with those trade unions and actually have reasonable conversations with people about passenger safety, which I think is very important.
There are no issues.
They made plans to get rid of all of the ticket offices, not even taking into account
that was a consultation, and
disability.
I do just want to stop. It's been a genuinely fascinating discussion, but I just want to get a couple more people's thoughts on Rishi Sunak, because it's only fair. We did the same with Keir Starmer. You have given us your view. At least you did something. Rishi Sunak, a word that springs into your mind when I say Rishi Sunak. Divide.
Well-dressed.
Well-dressed.
We didn't vote for him.
Rishi Sunak.
Weak.
Rishi Sunak?
Positive. Performative.
Too safe.
There you go. Too safe. Do you think he's too safe, Leah?
I think he does have a very balanced and measured approach. He was a very good chancellor. You would expect somebody who's a capable chancellor to be safe. I would rather have the country in safe hands than with a government who wants to nationalise everything. I mean, everything will just grind to a halt. We've seen it all before.
Final thought from Melanie before we go to the break.
I think that Rishi Sunak is being trounced in every single by-election around the country, and that's probably a more accurate measure than Leah's perspective today.
OK. It's been fascinating to talk to you guys so far. Thank you so much for such a lively debate. Thank you. Really interesting. Next up, we've been asking people about whether or not they think politicians care about them or their part of the country, and what issues do they want dealt with. We're going to be finding out next. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Katie Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent. When you think of Glastonbury, it's mud you want and music. They're going to cross to us live in a minute. Thank you so much. Brad Pitt is now a prolific producer behind the scenes.
It's not a mystery to me. We always were capable of doing this.
Oh, they're wonderful children as an audience.
Who did that? Maverick here on the red carpet. I'm so excited, Tom Cruise. This is the story of the night.
And it's the little independent film that could.
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
Nor have I ever struck any woman in my life.
There's this illusion of power.
Are you feeling well? I remember covering the Oscars and that now infamous moment, the Will Smith slap. Nobody could quite believe that it happened. You can tell from these crowds just how excited people are for the return of Pride.
These actors playing the lead roles were born long after the Sex Pistols broke up.
Are you pleased that you did say yes to the job?
I've never regretted it.
As a team, we've interviewed some of the biggest stars in the world. It can be incredibly surreal being swept up in their world, but we try to give you an honest sense of how these people really are.
Okay, I'll talk to you.
Don't leave me.
Yeah, okay.
There's no easy goodies. There's no easy baddies.
I've had a great time here.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome back to this Politics Hub Target Town special live from Grimsby. We're talking about trust in our politicians. We're talking to our live audience and the two women who are hoping to be the next MP for the area. Let's have a look now, shall we, at our exclusive national poll by YouGov for Sky News and what it tells us about the disconnect between people and the politicians who serve them, because we found that there's been a deep loss of public faith in British politics, particularly since the last election in 2019. What surprises the pollsters is that at the height of the pandemic, there was a rally in trust in the government, but that has now very much dissipated, according to our YouGov poll. So we asked the question, how much do politicians care about people like you? Well, in response, 83% of people said not very much or not at all. And only 11% said they feel politicians care a lot about them or a fair amount about people like them. So those are the results of that poll. We also, of course, asked them other questions as well, including about how much they think politicians care about their part of the country, because there is a widespread view, I think it's fair to say, outside of London, people not necessarily getting the attention that they want to see. So we asked the question whether or not politicians care about part of the country. 86% of people in the north of England said that politicians either don't care very much or at all about their part of the country. Now, that compares to just 47% in London. So a huge difference there between people in different areas and how much they feel care about it. I mean, it's come up already in the programme, immigration, and I think it is perhaps a good place to kind of start. Often a thing that people say, look, we're not allowed to talk about it, or we should be talking about it enough. We've been talking about it quite a lot recently. But when we were chatting to people here, a few people did say that, you know, immigration was something that mattered to them, particularly in conjunction with the economy. And Sarah, you were one of these people, weren't you?
Yes.
Sarah, good to talk to you. Sarah, you voted Conservative in 2019, didn't
Yes.
you? And you said the economy is something that matters to you, and also immigration. Do you want to just talk a bit about
that?
why?
I think Ronald Reagan said it best, and my most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help, which I think is basically what most people think about the intervention of either a Labour or a Conservative government. If you look at the levels of spending in the North versus London, you know, Labour has been in power in the North, the majority North, for decades. They've done nothing. The Conservatives have been in power in some form or the other since 2010. They've done nothing. In a town like Grimsby, if I get the opportunity, I want to leave. And it's a shame, really, because, you know, my family is from here. I've lived most of my life here. So shouldn't places like Grimsby be a draw for young people, especially when you look at the housing prices in, say, London? I'm not saying Grimsby house prices aren't, you know, rising as well, but you think that people should want to go to places like this instead of, you know, just, yeah.
I'm really interested in that, because you say that if you get the opportunity to leave Grimsby, you will. I think you're in your 20s, aren't you?
Yes.
Mid-20s, you're living with your parents, you're a remote worker.
Yeah.
But if you got a job elsewhere, you'd be off.
Yeah, somewhere like, you know, Leeds. We just went to Liverpool in February, and that's an absolutely wonderful city. You know, obviously you can't compare its apples and oranges. But when you look at Grimsby, yeah, they say they're going to build a new cinema. Who goes to the cinema anymore? It's expensive. People watch it on Netflix. The town centre, it's vape shops or barbers or charity shops. There's no big shops. I mean, again, I can understand they say the rates here are high, but that's the thing about Grimsby. No one does care about us. And at the end of the day, you can vote for any politician, but when they start caring about us, maybe we'll care back.
I mean, it's pretty, you know, you're very eloquent in how you put a lot of these things. What could the women here do to make you want to stay in Grimsby? What would make you want to stay in this area?
First, I think we need a more diverse economy. Obviously, they talk about offshore wind farming, which I think is a good start. Obviously, we used to have the fishing, now that's no longer. We need a diversified. We need retail. We need, you know, we don't really have manufacturing anymore in this country, but a more diverse, especially for young people, especially university educated, that don't want to be working in factories. And that's not putting our nose up at people who do that hard work. It's young people saying, you know, we've got a degree in X, Y, and Z. We want to use that or be in a certain economy.
Let's talk to Leah and Mel, shall we?
We do have...
How does that... I mean, you know, I know, but I'm interested how, you know, here you've got Sarah. She's a really bright, articulate young woman. She's got ambitions. She lives in Grimsby, and she says she wants to leave. I mean, how does that make you feel? Does it make you feel sad?
It's terrible. You know, Grimsby, you know, is a great town. It's my hometown. I love it. But it's not a city. And, you know, it won't be for a very long time, if ever. So as a young person, you do want to go to more vibrant places. But let's be honest, the reason that the high street is struggling is because most people are buying from the internet now. So the high street has got to change. It's got to be able to change for the future. And so it needs to start to do different things. And nobody has actually solved that. Go down any street in London, exactly the same is happening in London.
Well, it's not, though, is it? It is.
Victoria Street in London.
More than a quarter of shops in Grimsby town were empty. And that's double the national average.
Well,
so it is different.
I would invite you to walk down Victoria Street in London, in Westminster, and you'll see exactly the same there.
I'm just looking at the statistics rather than walking down random street. A quarter of shops in Grimsby town empty. That's double the national average.
Yeah, yeah. But Grimsby, since fishing ended, has had decades where the town has been left by every party. You know, the reason I wanted to stand, I never thought I would become an MP because, you know, everybody said Grimsby was a Labour town, but I wanted to do this job because I feel passionate about it, and it's not going to change overnight. But you know, people, you know, Sarah says that manufacturing it isn't happening in the UK. It is. Manufacturing is booming. It's growing. We manufacture seafood here. We are the biggest centre for seafood processing. We've got new opportunities. The Humber and the south of the Humber in particular is seen by the government and Rishi Sunak as the biggest opportunity. So I work with schools. I work with businesses to go out and say these are the jobs that are available. You need to get good school education, good skills, because everything is here. This is going to be the centre of the UK in the next 2 or 3 decades.
You're talking about fish. I want to talk to Patrick later, and because I think we've got the owner of one of the earliest fish smokers in Grimsby in the audience tonight. So we're definitely going to talk to you about the economy. But first, Mel, I just want you to respond to Sarah. But what would you say to Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, it is really awful to hear that, and you know. Once upon a time when I was young, I went away to university and left, and I've come back again. And I think that that's probably quite a true story of lots of people in Grimsby. And of course, we've got people like Patrick who come to the area from other areas to work and be part of our economy and our community and contribute. And I think that there is what I am seeing actually is loads and loads of people in the community who are pulling together, who are trying to make this a much better place to be. You know, I was in a room with 400 people who are working in the community, all trying to maximise the work that they're doing and capitalise on that and try and make it feel a bit more modern, because I think that one of the things is, when I was a young person particularly, it did feel a little bit left behind, and I did want to experience city living, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But coming back, I did want it to then keep up, and it feels like things come a bit too late. And I think, you know, we're talking about, you know, people not feeling like they've got any control over things. I think that there is room and opportunity for government to start to give much more control and say back to local areas and local people so that they can have a say. Because it seems really strange. Why on earth is somebody sitting in Whitehall deciding where money is going, you know, which public toilets are open in Cleethorpes, decided in Whitehall? It just doesn't make any sense. So making sure... Well, it is through the bidding. No, it is through the bidding system. It is through the bidding system. You have to put a project...
We're under
forward,
Labour as
you
well,
have
though.
to have all of those details.
It's not like it's changed under the Conservatives.
But making sure that, you know, devolution actually works for people and that you can deliver, on not making people bid into central government, actually giving them the resources that they need.
The EU instead?
No. The government gives them the money that they need for the services that they're going to be doing. At the moment, it's a Hunger Games style, and it is failing to deliver.
That's exactly the basis that the EU works
Sarah,
on.
what do you make of the response you've had on the panel?
And don't mean to be disrespectful, but you don't sort of expect anything else. You expect the politicians are going to be pushing their angle. I just hope that whoever gets elected will do good for Grimsby, and I just wish them well, because you don't want your MP to fail, whoever they are.
I am going to come to you, Sean, but first I want to go to Patrick, if I may. Patrick, you're the owner, I can see it on your shirt, I think, the owner of Alfred Enderby, one of the earliest fish smokers in Grimsby.
Indeed.
We've been talking about, you know, the challenges for shops and businesses in Grimsby, about high streets. What's your experience as a businessman?
Well, Sarah had a great point, but I don't necessarily agree. I think Grimsby is often dumbed down, and particularly by the media, who come with a narrative because they see this place and they want to agree with some sort of narrative, and the BBC are worse, by the way.
It's all right, don't worry, we're
no, they
thick-skinned.
really are.
You can
really are. But
say what you think.
People forget that we're the largest fish processing town in the Northern Hemisphere. We're supplying 70% of the UK's fish. And, you know, everybody comes here, and the BBC have done this to me, and they've said, well, of course, you've lost the fishing industry and the place is derelict and it's finished and everything else. That's wrong, actually. If we were still fishing in Iceland, and we're not, but the Icelandics are, we wouldn't be bringing it all the way back to Grimsby to land it. We would land it in Iceland and bring it down on a large container vessel like we do today. We would then grade it here in Grimsby like we do today, and we would process it here in Grimsby. And all the major fish processing companies are thriving, they're successful, they're here. We have the only protected food name in all of Lincolnshire, and that's Grimsby Traditional Smoked Fish. And, you know, that's worth shouting about. That's great. That's like Melton Mowbray pork pie and Cornish clotted cream. And we're a bit too keen to dumb ourselves down. We've got investors right now who are working on plans to renovate the docks, and I've seen drawings today, and I've spoken with that developer, and it's very, very exciting. We've got film industry people. I've had a meeting this week with a 40 Institute of Heritage organisation, whatever they're called, and they're all very excited about some of the plans that's going on in Grimsby. It's not absolutely down on its knees, and if it were, that's not a bad place to be, because the best place to push away from is something solid, and that might be the bottom. But tomorrow, come back, and it's not all bad, OK? It's not all bad. Politically, well, that's a different thing. I mean,
go on, what, you say it's a different thing. What do you mean by that, then?
I don't know, really. You know, I mean, it's beggars bloody belief that the water companies have a chief executive that's paid £300,000 plus, and he's bloody rubbish. This lot are paid 90 bloody grand. I wouldn't do it for that price.
No. So you think MP should be paid more money?
Well, I think we should have half as many and pay them 3 times as much and get some really good ones. And if they think they're good enough and worth that money, and be a bit more accountable, then fine, let's get on with it.
As well. Talking about getting better MPs, I heard a rumour that the last time you were on Sky News, you got a phone call.
I did get a phone call.
Who did you get a phone call from?
Well, actually, I got an email about 3.5 seconds after the bloody thing saying you voted Conservative, you're a traitor, I'm embarrassed and it's disgusting, which I ignored, incidentally. And, by the way, lots of people voted Conservative because they got in. Yeah. And then I got a call by somebody saying, would I like to be a candidate for the Reform Party? Now, you know, I said, thank you very much. Now, running Alfred Enderby, which is a small private traditional smoker, is hard enough. Running UK PLC is bloody difficult, especially with the sort of global shocks. No, I wasn't tempted.
Well, you weren't tempted, no.
No, I bloody wasn't.
No.
And not for that price either, not for 90 grand.
Fascinating.
And I'm
obviously,
not clever enough, by the way.
There you go. Reform obviously chomping at the bit here in Grimsby, trying to get a top candidate. If you want a career in politics, obviously, you need to get on Sky News. It clearly is the way to do. Reform. You worried about reform in the area, Leah?
No, I'm not worried about any opposition. You know, you don't go into this potential role, thinking it's a job for life. I work hard, I'm passionate about Grimsby. I'm probably more reformed than most reform candidates, to be honest. You know, I'm constantly called a rebel, but that's because most people in Grimsby think in a similar way to I do. So I hold our government to account on that. So, no, I'm not. You know, reform, I've got a lot of ideas that people locally do like. But are they a fully formed political party? No, they're not. Lee Anderson has moved over to them. I love Lee Anderson, he's a fantastic colleague, but he, in my opinion, the Reform Party is not able to give him the kind of support that the Conservative Party is able to give him. And if people vote for Reform this time round, what we'll get is a Labour government, so you need to be careful what you wish for.
It's interesting, because Reform have done, you know, quite well in places like Grimsby. It's obviously somewhere that voted for Brexit. Is it a problem that the Labour...
This is the first time, isn't it, that Reform has stood? It was Brexit Party.
Yeah, the Brexit Party, there you go. Do you think that it is a problem that the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, backed a second referendum?
I think that people are hearing that Labour are saying we have heard the British public, we've heard places like Grimsby and Cleethorpes, and we will not be going back into the EU. You know, we won't be going back into a single market or a customs union. And I think people appreciate that. Can I just finish what I'm saying? So that is the position of the Labour Party, and I think people appreciate that that has been heard. And I think that, you know, there are lots of other things that do need to be done. I mean, what's happening at the moment with the Conservatives is that, you know, they know that the Brexit deal that was done doesn't work. It's why they've had to go back and have a look at different arrangements that have been put in place and reform those again. So there obviously needs to be more work done to make things work more smoothly and to benefit British business.
Was it a bit disrespectful of people who voted Leave in places like Grimsby that Labour was... so many people on the Labour side were calling for a second referendum?
I think that there were... No, I absolutely... I wasn't. And, you know, I was very keen to... I don't think it was disrespectful. I think people were doing what they thought was right at the time. But I think that they have recognised that, you know, going down that route is not where the British public is, and the Labour Party is very much in listening mode and understanding mode. I went on a radio show with David Lammy, and he invited me on specifically because he and I had you know, discussions about this and disagreements about this. And I said, you know, really, David, you know, you should have listened more to people like me. And he accepted that that was the case.
This is the problem that we've got, is that the Westminster bubble and the majority of the Labour Party think that the electorate are stupid. I've had so many people come to me from the Labour Party who've said, oh, you little Englanders, you wanted Brexit because you're little Englanders.
Who said that to you then?
Yeah, no, but not MPs, but people from who support the Labour Party have said, little Englanders, that's what you think.
Constituents?
Who? No, absolutely not my constituents. You know, so my constituents want to make sure that Britain can actually be the sovereign state that it is now and be able to make its own choices.
You're part of the Westminster bubble, aren't you, if you're an MP?
No, I mean, that's where I work in the week. But no, I'm not. I mean, I am here to serve the people of the constituency and to listen to what they've got to say. And Brexit is going to give us all sorts of different benefits. Was it difficult to transition? Initially, yes, it was. But we've got more growth. We'll be able to take control over what we want to do with immigration.
Well, let's talk about immigration, shall we? Because, you know, you went into the 2019 election with a promise on immigration, right? You promised in that manifesto to bring overall net migration down. So at the time, that was 184,000. It's now 672,000. How's that promise going?
Well, because I've challenged the Prime Minister, well, each Prime Minister actually, because that is what they promised, and that's what majority of constituents have said. Last autumn, I went to see Rishi Sunak and said, we want to see legal migration halved. He listened to us, and now when we see the next figures coming through, you'll see a massive cut.
What, it's not going to go down to 184,000?
It's not going to go, but it's going to be halved. It'll be, I expect it'll be around 350,000.
So you'll only kind of double it then from what you promised last time.
Yeah, but then we keep the pressure on. That's my job as a backbencher, because we need more British people to have higher quality jobs, better pay. That's how we're going to change things like our Grimsby Town Centre, with people having better jobs. British people, OK, yes, we do. We're not saying that we don't want any legal migration, because people have got very good skills, and if they've got those skills and we want them here, let's have them here. Okay. But we can't continue that unsustainable level. 750,000 people over
it's under the Conservatives,
2 years.
It's under your government that is
but I've challenged it. I've challenged it. Okay. I am only one of 650 MPs across the whole House, but I'll keep fighting for Grimsby.
We're going to have more from this in a moment, but let's go to the break next, shall we? You're watching a Politics Hub Target Town special from Grimsby. Coming up next, the data tells us that more people think the two main parties are the same than at any time since records began back in 1964. Leah and Mel will get the chance to tell us why they disagree.